today's show, you'll hear investor perspectives on the COVID-19 impact on the chronic pain market. This is Investor Perspectives. I'm the host of Investor Connect, Hall T. Martin, where we connect startups and investors for funding. It's the time of COVID-19. The healthcare industry is overwhelmed with patients from the pandemic. Medical conditions such as chronic pain continue to grow due to the opioid crisis. We recently held an interview with experts and investors in the area of chronic pain. Our host is Ashley Matisse. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today. My name is Ashley Matisse. I am the Director of Outreach for 10 Capital. I am joined today by some lovely gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. Michio Painter is a pain specialist and investor with Joyance Partners. Brett Lanuti is with Nosamed. Brian Carrico and Dan Clarence are with Innovative Health Solutions. This discussion on investments in health tech and treatments of chronic pain is meant to be as informative as possible. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the raise your hand button or pop them into the chat box and we will get those questions answered for you. As I said, I'm with 10 Capital as a funding as a service program for startups and growth companies, and we have an amazing network of investors. Investors, if you have any questions about either of our clients today, we'd be happy to connect you. And with that, Michio, I would love to start off with your background and experience in pain management and health tech, if you want to kick us off.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Ashley, for having me. Again, I'm Michio Painter, and I'm a venture partner with Social Starts and Joyance, where we invest in what we call the deep science of health and happiness and delightful moments. And certainly health tech and chronic pain is part of that. That's a particularly important topic to me because I'm also the founder of a company called Blue Therapeutics, where I've been the CEO there for the last 5 years, trying to develop non-addictive painkillers. So I've kind of been on both sides of the table, if you will. From an investor point of view, I think it is really a really exciting area because if you look at it, pain as a whole, I think has the largest discrepancy between its kind of unmet need, the number of patients that are in pain, have various forms of pain, the healthcare burden in terms of the financial cost to society, and a gap in lack of funding. So actually, it's an area I think is just very primed for new solutions across the board. And I think that's extends well beyond the kind of opioid crisis that we're all familiar with by now. I think the problem of pain goes back many decades before that, where we just have not had good solutions. We've had sort of broad, not terribly effective strategies. But I think now, we really need to develop better precision in our therapeutics, whether that's treatment specifically for women in pain, making much better and more rigorous non-drug approaches towards pain as another thing that you're going to hear about. And also there's a huge need for just better diagnostics and biomarkers because right now we're relying heavily on just patients' own feelings of things, which is always hard. So in short, I think that I'm very excited as an investor by the space. I've helped to lead an investment personally recently in pain, and I'm excited to hear more from these two companies. So thank you.
To refresh, Nosamed really is a technology that was licensed out of UC San Francisco really back in 2008 as the orthopedic and spine surgeons were struggling to really find out why these chronic back pain patients were struggling so deeply with back pain, and really no good diagnostic information was available to them outside of a standard MRI, which does great for all types of different anatomic challenges, but certainly hasn't been effective in chronic back pain. And so ultimately that's been Nosamed's journey for quite some time. We've managed to navigate our way through COVID-19. We've got approximately 14 commercial sites in the US, the UK, and in Austria. And I think are seeing some of those patients now coming back to the MRI centers that are now starting to open up. I think what's exciting about where Nosamed is today is that we recently were able to get positive feedback from Medicare around a code that exists, but that has not had Medicare coverage. And they've now decided that they will retire the non-coverage decision, which ultimately opens up a path now, a direct line of sight path for reimbursement for Nosomed. So we're very excited about that. It'll be official in November. And I think that's probably our biggest update. And so now we're working really with our reimbursement consultant out of DC to navigate the path as we start to prepare to meet with the various entities that'll help drive commercial reimbursement alongside of Medicare.
Could you kind of explain what Nosomed does so patients aren't quite going through so much pain during the diagnosis?
Historically, these chronic back pain patients generally on average, and I think some of the videos you're referring to are some of the patients that have spent anywhere from 3 to 4 years. They've seen 11 different clinicians. And it's one of the reasons why there is a significant opioid crisis in the world today, because the number 2 consumer of opioids in the world are chronic back pain patients. And so the diagnostic options they have outside of physical therapy and opioids really come down to something called a provocative discogram, which is an invasive procedure where they need to go into the hospital and ultimately they're sedated but still awake. And at that time, the interventional pain doctor is trying to re-provoke where their pain is coming from by sticking a needle into their disc, pressurizing it with dye, and seeing if the patient feels pain. Then unfortunately, once they do, they have to find 2 reference discs. So it's very painful. There's about a 3% complication rate. Stanford recently came out with a paper suggesting that it actually is accelerating degeneration in discs. And so it's really fallen out of favor. And so now we're back to the same scenario where these patients really are just left, just bouncing around the system because everybody's afraid to do anything with these patients because historically their surgical intervention and their surgical outcomes have been very poor. And ultimately, what Nosomed was able to show is that with published data, that when there is a positive disc that we've identified and there's been clinical intervention only at that disc, those patients improved in function and pain by 93%. So we think this is now, if you will, a minimally invasive option for these patients. That again is that is acquired through a standard MRI and a 30-minute procedure, then go back to their active daily life right after their standard MRI.
And could you just give us any sort of updates in regards to how COVID-19 has possibly affected the business?
We've got about 14 commercial sites around the country. Our most exciting site is actually in New York City. They have 3 centers that are providing the Nosomed technology. And obviously, New York, as hard hit as it was, really slowed down our commercial adoption. And now that those centers are coming back online, we're starting to see more patients coming back.
If you want to go ahead and give us your update with IHS. Brett, could you give us an update on your raise?
So we actually tried to buy a little bit of extra runway with a convertible note at about $2.5 million. Our existing investor group filled all about $2 million of the $2.5 million. So we have a little bit of a convertible note open for some smaller investment. We were working with the group out of New York to raise $10 million on a Series C. The valuation we're going to let dictated a little bit by the market because we are early revenue and we want to be reasonable about our valuation. We think we can get profitable on that full $10 million, and we're looking at it in chunks of $5 million and then hitting some benchmarks for the additional $5 million. And right now we've got several interested parties, both strategic as well as just institutional investment, and we're navigating our way through those various investors. And so probably the best opportunity would be the filling out the convertible note, unless there's some institutional investment interest, which I could go ahead and navigate the connection with the investment banking group we're working with out in New York.
Michio, did you have something you wanted to add here?
So the opioid crisis is a tailwind for us in one sense because obviously it's brought a huge amount of awareness around the need for different therapeutics. There's also, much more scrutiny at the regulatory level because of the same concern, right? Everyone doesn't want to put out the next OxyContin. So we as a company sort of navigate these spaces, and might be interesting for everyone to hear too, just how your individual company and space is subject to those overall kind of conditions.
We've got quite a bit of demand outside in Australia and Canada. And so I think that's been a headwind for us is taking advantage of getting into those countries which have fairly easy approval process. But I think agree with you on the tailwinds piece. NOSEM has been fortunate to participate in something called the Backpack, which is really about a $150 million NIH grant broadly across a number of different educational institutions, looking at phenotyping chronic back pain patients and what's really driving their chronic pain because it's such a complex issue. And so NOSEM will participate at 5 sites as part of this overall NIH grant. And we think that'll be some tailwinds that'll help us going into 2021.
That's great to hear. I mean, from my point of view, both as an investor and as founder of a company myself, I think that we're really primed to see big wins in this space. And I think that that's going to create a bit of a snowball effect. I'm way down in the preclinical aspect, but my company has benefited from about $5 million in non-dilutive funding from the NIH and the DoD. So that's certainly been a huge help to me in the space. I've likewise encountered tremendous support in the pain sphere, right? There's so many, it touches everyone, touches everybody.
I think what's really significant for us is the fact that this is going to be a longitudinal, long-term study. We get access to all the data that actually helps us get more informed. And, we're really, I would say, more of a machine learning type technology right now than an AI. But I think these learnings and what is really generating some of the pain from these patients will help us.
With COVID-19, where you're trying to do research and clinical trials, how has it been affected? Because all the resources from most of the research facilities are going to COVID.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we've got 8 sites currently that are part of a secondary study. It'll follow on the already published data that we have. And really the headwinds there have been really just patient enrollment because those patients haven't been getting into the clinic because technically some of these back pain cases or patients are coming in and they're considered elective.
Thank you for joining us today. As always, be sure to leave a review, subscribe to this podcast, and share it with others. Let's go start up something today. Halti Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.